My name is Stormi Bradham, and I'm an addict. I grew up in a home that drinking and doing drugs was normal. I was one of the kids who needed therapy, needed counseling, and I never received it. I've been a kid that got taken by DHS. I had grandparents as support system, and as a child, I didn't know it wasn't normal, but once I got to the age of seeing my other friends' parents and families, and I could realize that my life wasn't normal, then I started to feel different. And it probably caused some isolation if I think back on it. I was a kid that was in beta club and in basketball and in softball, and I excelled in those things, but I had a deep embedded fear of abandonment and rejection that stemmed from the childhood I had, and it caused me to run to places to change the way I felt, and I didn't have the resources available to help, and so I got into drugs and alcohol at 15, 16 years old. It started with alcohol and hanging out, and it didn't really turn into drugs until I graduated high school, but it was bad enough to where I dropped out of beta club, dropped out of cheerleading. I actually quit playing softball. I got pregnant at 17, and I had a baby at 18. I did end up graduating high school, and the only way I knew how to deal with that, and I say deal with that, I was a child who shouldn't have had a kid at 18 and didn't have a parent to show me how to raise a kid, and so I self-medicated. I got into drugs, as far as like pills. I'm trying to keep this really short. I got into pills and other things, and that led to a whole group of people who just did everything. And it got really bad. I mean, it was always bad. I understand y'all are like normal, but it was always bad. I was like 24, I started dating this guy who was doing meth, and I decided that sounded like a fantastic idea. I needed a little more excitement because living at home with 2 kids and no job wasn't exciting enough. And so I did that for about 5 months until I got arrested. And my mom, I say that I did grow up in a bad home. I think she did the best she could with her own addiction to alcoholism. I love my mother, and she, as best she could, was there for me. And I've come a long ways to be able to say that. Anyways, I went to jail for stealing my grandmother's credit card and maxing it out. And I got arrested actually here in El Dorado when I was in the newspaper. And I was like, what am I getting arrested for? And they didn't know, and they were like, well, maybe you have a ticket you didn't pay. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. Yeah, right. I knew what I was getting arrested for, and I was still playing. I guess I was in denial. I was still in denial about it. And they took my butt right to Hampton jail, and my mom let me sit there for 3 months. And she did the right thing, but I somehow convinced them to come and get me. And I think it was because, I think that just looking at it as in a mother's perspective, I cannot imagine, but it wasn't long enough. It wasn't enough. She bonded me out, and I stepped into recovery. I say recovery. It's not recovery unless you're working the program of recovery. I stepped into a meeting at 24 years old, and probably 2 days later was high. I didn't change anything. I wasn't ready. You would think that losing custody of your children and going to jail would cause someone to be ready, and I just wasn't. So I had to go get arrested again, go do some more drugs and get arrested again, and lots of fun things in between that I'm gonna spare y'all with. But I did run from the police one time, and that was literally insane. Looking back, I could not even believe I did that. I did manage to get away. But just so everyone's aware, I got away. But I ended up at my mother's house because I had nowhere else to go. Who was going to take this strung out? I had no car, no phone, nothing. I broke into my mom's house and was hiding, and at the time she was in recovery and she came home from an AA meeting, and anyways, they called the cops on me. So I did get caught, but the police did not physically catch me. Let's just get that out there. Anyways, moving on from that, I went to jail and somehow managed to manipulate them into letting me go to rehab again, because I had only been 4 times that year. So the 5th time was sure to do it, right? And my probation officer was on vacation. It worked out great. So they were like, okay, and they let me go to Texarkana, and I went to rehab there, and I stayed, and it was the first rehab I completed. And I went into sober living, and I had a warrant for my arrest because my probation officer said, when you abscond and you fail to report and you don't pay your fines, she doesn't care how long you're staying in rehab or how many halfway houses you go to, you're still gonna get arrested. And I did. They took my butt right out of that halfway house and threw me back in jail. And I went before the judge, I don't know how many days later, because it was just traumatizing. But the foundation of my recovery started in Texarkana, Arkansas. Texarkana, Texas? I don't know, either one, both, yeah. I ended up going to prison, even though I completed, and it was the best thing that could have happened, because I was still only focused on what I could get from whoever was around me, even though I'd only been in treatment 30 days. Like, I was nowhere near ready to start healing from the trauma that had impacted my life. I went and I got locked up in West Memphis. It's called minimum security, ACC. I call it prison. I don't care what anybody else calls it. It is prison. We had it was prison. And I did not have one visitor. My mom talked to me when she could. I had no money on my books. I had no one. And it was a real humbling experience. I met people who impacted my life and helped me see how to be grateful. My child, who was 8 or 9, 7 maybe, I don't even remember honestly, he was sending me letters to prison of gratitude A to Z, and he was listing everything he was grateful for, starting with the letter A. And I really needed to sit there and read that and process and grieve things that I had never had an opportunity to grieve. And that's why whenever anyone asks me if they should get someone out of jail, I say no. Do not go get them. Because God's plans are bigger and greater than ours. I don't care what your pride and ego is saying or how much you love your baby. God loves them more. And, I got out, and I had already had that 30 days in Texarkana where the recovery is truly amazing. I'm not kidding. Their community, they made me feel loved and accepted. And so I wanted that. I got out of prison, and crazy. I got out of prison. I was 27. And I lived in Camden. I got my first job because I was not a functioning anything. I didn't have, I had little jobs, but I didn't stay at a job. I got my first job in Camden at B&M Painting, and I got in recovery and I dove in head first. I met this guy and his wife, who are truly amazing. We've been on this journey together, and his daughter, who's my best friend, and I worked the 12 steps. I got a sponsor. I created a community for myself, and through that I met my husband, who is also in recovery, and he brought me to this church, and that's all was God's plan, because through, like, I'm not going to talk down on any church, but like I had never felt accepted in church, and it probably stemmed from a lot of my own insecurities, and probably a lot of the ideas my mom had about church, honestly. But I came here and I felt loved and accepted, and I was terrified of, because they are normal and they ask you things like, oh, where do your kids go to school? Oh, where do you work? Oh, and it's normal questions, but to me it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have custody of my kids. I have one kid that goes to school in Camden, I have one kid that goes to school in Hampton, and they didn't care. They just rolled on, and through that I have a child now that goes to El Dorado High School. That's his counselor. And my other kid, I still do not have custody of. His name is Atticus, and he goes to Smackover, and I get to see him on a regular basis. I have strong relationships with both of my kids. I'm currently going through some really hard things with my oldest kid, and I play a part in it. But I know God is going to see him through, like he saw me through. And I have had a spiritual experience inside AA and outside of AA, and God has healed me and set me free. And that's a testimony for another day, but it truly takes a community and love and understanding and advocating for people like me, because today I get to be a mom. I get to be a mom, and I have a little baby girl who I'm getting to raise. And those moments I don't remember with my boys, I'm getting to relive with her. And I get to be a wife, a good wife, a loving wife, a supportive wife. I get to be a best friend. I have a sponsor who I need to call more often. And I get to sponsor women in recovery. I get to walk through hard things without flipping out. And I have a job that will support me and my children if I ever find myself alone. And that's only because of God and the program and people like you who are supportive and want to know more.